"You need milk for your daughter, and I urgently need a husband," said the Apache girl. The sun was just beginning to climb above the horizon, spilling warm light over the dusty town at the edge of the desert. The air smelled of dry earth and sage, and the faint sound of horses' hooves echoed through the quiet streets. In this small, remote town, life moved slowly, shaped by the land and the people who worked it. Among them was a cowboy named Jacob, a man known for his quiet determination and gentle heart. He had spent years tending to his modest ranch, raising cattle and maintaining his land with the skill of someone who understood the delicate balance of nature. But what truly defined him now was not the work he did, but the life he was trying to hold together, raising his young daughter, Emma, alone after the sudden death of his wife 2 years ago. Jacob loved his daughter more than anything. She was a bright, curious child with her mother's eyes and a laughter that could lift even the heaviest of moods. But raising a child on his own was not easy. Every day was a challenge. There were bills to pay, crops to care for, and the never-ending task of making sure Emma had enough food and clothing. On some days, he barely managed to scrape together enough milk for her breakfast, let alone anything else. He worked long hours, sometimes from before dawn until after dusk, with only the hope that he could keep things running smoothly for her. On this particular morning, Jacob saddled his horse and rode into town. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few townsfolk moving about their morning routines. He dismounted near the trading post, a small wooden building with faded paint and a creaky door that welcomed locals and travelers alike. The trading post was where people came to buy supplies, exchange news, and occasionally meet someone new. Jacob was there for milk, bread, and a few small necessities for his daughter. As he entered the trading post, he noticed the usual crowd of customers. A couple of farmers discussing the weather, a young man checking the stock of tools, and a few women gathering supplies for their families. But today, his attention was drawn to someone he had not seen before. She stood near the counter, her posture confident, her eyes alert and intelligent. She was a young Apache woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with dark hair that fell loosely over her shoulders and a look of quiet strength about her. She wore practical clothing, suited for travel or work, yet there was an elegance in the way she carried herself, a balance of grace and purpose. Jacob approached the counter to collect the milk and other supplies, not paying much attention to the woman. But then she spoke, and her words stopped him in his tracks. "You need milk for your daughter, and I urgently need a husband," she said, her voice clear and steady, with a hint of humor that did not hide the seriousness behind it. Jacob blinked, caught completely off guard. He had expected small talk, perhaps a nod or a polite greeting, but this direct statement was something entirely different. He looked at her, unsure how to respond. Her eyes met his, and there was no hesitation, no playfulness intended to mock him, only honesty. It was a statement so bold and unexpected that it made him pause, a mix of surprise and curiosity stirring inside him. He cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. I don't even know what to say," he admitted, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips despite the confusion. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him, and smiled softly. "Then just say you need the milk, cowboy," she replied. Her words carried a quiet strength, an understanding that life was practical and needed decisions, even if they came with a touch of humor. Jacob chuckled, handing over the coins for the milk, his curiosity growing. There was something unusual about this woman, something that made her presence feel significant. He noticed the way she moved, confident but unassuming, careful yet unafraid. In a town where most people were wary of outsiders, she seemed entirely herself, and it intrigued him. As he prepared to leave, she spoke again, this time with a hint of warmth in her voice. "You're raising a child on your own, aren't you?" Jacob nodded slowly, a little surprised by her insight. "Yes, my wife, she passed away 2 years ago." It's just me and Emma now." He hesitated for a moment, unsure why he was sharing this with a woman he had just met, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet understanding, that made it easier to speak. "I see," she said softly. "It's not easy, I imagine. Raising a child alone requires courage and patience." Jacob felt a strange mix of gratitude and relief. Most people would have only offered sympathy or, worse, judgment. But she was speaking to him as an equal, recognizing his effort without pity. It's been hard, yes," he admitted. "Some days I worry I'm not doing enough. Even getting milk for her can be a struggle." The woman's expression softened. "Then let me help," she said simply. "I can help with the small things, milk, food, chores, whatever you need. And in return, maybe you can help me with something too." Jacob looked at her, unsure what she meant. She smiled, the kind of smile that seemed to promise understanding without asking for explanations. "I need a husband," she said again, her tone matter of fact. He laughed this time, a full, genuine laugh, not one of mockery but one of surprise and amusement. "That's not something I hear every day," he admitted. "You're very direct." "And you're very quiet," she replied, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Perhaps that's why we might get along." Jacob shook his head, still smiling. He could not explain why, but something about this woman drew him in. Perhaps it was her confidence, perhaps her honesty, or perhaps it was the sense that she understood life in a way few people did. In that moment, he realized that this encounter, as strange as it was, might be the beginning of something important. As he left the trading post, carrying the milk and supplies for Emma, he could not help but glance back. The woman was watching him leave, her expression calm, yet expectant. It was as if she already knew their paths would cross again. Over the next few days, Jacob found himself thinking about her more than he expected. The town was small and news traveled quickly, but he had heard nothing else about her. He did not even know her name yet. But the memory of her eyes, the strength in her voice, and the peculiar mix of humor and honesty lingered in his mind. Emma, of course, was the first to notice a change in her father. She had been curious about his frequent trips to the trading post and asked him questions with her usual bluntness. "Did you meet the lady again, Daddy?" she asked one afternoon as he prepared dinner. Jacob paused, unsure how to answer. "Maybe," he said cautiously, not wanting to reveal too much to a child who had already endured loss beyond her years. But Emma was perceptive. "She seems nice," she said. "I think she would like me." Jacob smiled, feeling a warmth that had been missing from their home for a long time. Perhaps Emma was right. Perhaps this encounter was more than a coincidence. Days turned into a week, and Jacob began noticing the Apache woman more often. She appeared in the market, helping neighbors with small tasks, speaking to townsfolk with kindness and confidence. She seemed unafraid of judgment, living her life according to her own rules and needs. And in every encounter, whether brief or extended, Jacob felt a growing sense of connection, a quiet curiosity that refused to fade. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jacob returned to the trading post to pick up a few more supplies. To his surprise, she was there again, arranging baskets of fresh produce. She looked up as he entered, and her face lit with recognition. "You're back," she said simply. "And your daughter is safe, I hope." "Yes, thanks to you, or at least your advice about the milk," he replied with a small laugh. "Emma is fine. She's been asking about you, actually." Her smile softened. "I would like to meet her someday. I think children can tell a lot about a person." Jacob nodded, feeling a strange comfort in her words. There was an honesty about her that made him want to trust her, even if he did not fully understand why. In a world that had been harsh and unforgiving, meeting someone so direct, kind, and unafraid felt like a rare gift. As they talked, the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the air grew cooler. Jacob felt a flicker of hope he had not experienced in years. Perhaps, he thought, Life had a way of bringing the right people together at the right time, even if it came in the form of a bold statement about milk and marriage. And so their story began, not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with a simple, honest meeting that left both of them curious, cautious, and quietly hopeful. In that dusty town, among the hum of everyday life, the first threads of connection were woven, setting the stage for challenges, growth, and the unexpected bonds that would follow. The days following their first meeting passed with a slow, steady rhythm. Jacob found himself thinking of the Apache woman more than he expected. Her presence lingered in his mind, not as a fleeting curiosity, but as something that made the ordinary days feel lighter. He could not explain why, but there was a sense of comfort in the thought that she existed somewhere in town, living her life with purpose and honesty. He continued his daily routine on the ranch, caring for his cattle, fixing fences, and tending to the small garden behind his house. Life was still hard, but there was now a new energy beneath the surface, a quiet anticipation that tomorrow might bring another encounter, another conversation, another spark of connection. It was Emma, however, who noticed the change first. The young girl was growing fast, and her awareness of people and the world around her was sharper than most children her age. She often observed her father with a mixture of curiosity and concern, aware of the weight he carried on his shoulders. One morning, while helping him feed the chickens, she asked, "Daddy, do you think the lady from the trading post will come again?" Jacob paused, unsure what to say. I hope so," he admitted. "I think she might." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "Can she come to see me?" "I want to meet her," Jacob smiled, feeling a warmth that had been missing from their home for a long time. "Maybe," he said cautiously, "but let's see what happens." A few days later, their hope became reality. The Apache woman appeared at the edge of the ranch just as the sun was rising, carrying a basket of fresh bread and fruits. Her presence was calm and steady, her eyes bright and welcoming. Emma ran to greet her, her laughter ringing through the open space. Jacob watched quietly, a mixture of relief and curiosity swelling within him. He had not realized how much he had been longing for companionship, for someone who could bring a sense of warmth and stability to their small household. "Good morning, Emma," the woman said softly, kneeling down to meet the girl's eyes. "I thought you might like some fresh bread." Emma smiled shyly, taking the basket and examining its contents with delight. "Thank you, this looks wonderful." Jacob approached slowly, his hands tucked into his pockets. "You didn't have to bring anything," he said, though his voice lacked the usual reserve. "I wanted to," she replied simply. "It's easier to help someone when you can do it with your own hands." Over the next few weeks, the Apache woman became a frequent presence on the ranch. She helped with the chores, teaching Jacob small tricks she had learned growing up in her community: how to prepare the soil for planting, how to identify which herbs could be used for medicine, and how to mend clothes in ways that would last longer. Her knowledge and skills were practical, yet they carried a sense of care and tradition that fascinated Jacob. He had spent his life working with his hands, but her presence reminded him that there was more to life than survival. It was also about sharing, learning, and creating a home together. Emma adored her from the start. She was playful, patient, and attentive, making the little girl feel seen and valued. For the first time since his wife's passing, Jacob noticed how Emma's laughter had returned fully, not just in small bursts but in a steady stream that filled the ranch with life. Watching them together, he felt a quiet gratitude, recognizing that this connection was bringing joy not only to his daughter but also to himself. One evening, after a long day of work on the farm, they all sat together under the wide, open sky. The Apache woman had gathered herbs and prepared a simple meal, and they ate in companionable silence, listening to the sounds of the desert settling into night. The stars began to emerge, scattered across the sky like diamonds, and the cool breeze carried the scent of sage and earth. Jacob broke the silence. "You've helped more than I can say," he admitted. "Emma and we've been struggling to manage on our own, and your presence, it makes things easier." She smiled gently. "I see a family here," she said, "even if it's just the two of you, and families, they deserve support. I'm glad I can help." Her words carried a weight that went beyond casual kindness. Jacob felt a tug in his chest, a sense of connection that went deeper than he had expected. He realized that she was not just helping out of obligation or curiosity, she genuinely cared. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included her. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. The Apache woman shared stories from her own life, her family, her experiences growing up in a close-knit community, and the challenges she faced as a young woman in the world. Jacob listened intently, learning about her struggles and triumphs, her fears and dreams. He began to admire her courage, the way she spoke honestly about her needs while respecting the needs of others. It was a balance he had rarely encountered, and it drew him closer to her with each passing day. Emma became the bridge between them. She would ask questions, offer observations, and sometimes interrupt with bursts of excitement, but she also encouraged her father to open up. "Daddy, she's nice," Emma would say. "She's funny and kind. Can we keep her forever?" Jacob laughed softly, ruffling his daughter's hair. "We'll see," he would reply. Yet inside, he knew that Emma's instincts were right. This woman had brought light and stability into their lives, and he could not ignore the effect she had on both of them. One afternoon, while they were working together in the garden, Jacob felt a rare sense of ease. They moved side by side, planting seeds and tending to the soil, their conversation flowing naturally. The Apache woman spoke about the importance of patience, not just in gardening but in life. "Some things take time," she said, "and some things need care every day, just like these plants. But if you nurture them, they grow stronger than you imagine." Jacob nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "It's the same with people, isn't it?" he asked. She looked at him and smiled, a quiet understanding in her eyes. "Exactly. People need care too, and sometimes the right people come into your life to remind you of that." Their days became filled with simple routines and small joys. The Apache woman taught Emma how to make simple crafts, like weaving small baskets and painting stones. Jacob taught her how to ride horses safely and care for the animals. They celebrated small victories together, like a healthy crop in the garden or a new skill learned, and shared the burdens of daily life. Through these ordinary moments, an extraordinary connection began to form, built on trust, respect, and mutual support. But the bond was not without its challenges. Jacob occasionally found himself questioning the Apache woman's intentions. She had spoken openly about needing a husband, and though her presence had become invaluable, he worried whether her affection was genuine or driven by necessity. He tried to push the thought away, focusing on the present, but it lingered in the back of his mind. At the same time, the Apache woman faced her own uncertainties. She cared deeply for Jacob and Emma, but she also knew that stepping into their lives was a risk. She was entering a world that was partly foreign, with customs and expectations different from her own. Yet her decision to stay, to help, and to build a connection reflected a quiet courage that impressed Jacob more than words could express. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the ranch, Jacob sat with her by the edge of the garden, watching Emma chase butterflies among the flowers. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You've done more than anyone could ask. You've brought life back into our home." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, a gesture of reassurance and understanding. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "I see your effort, your care for Emma, and your heart. That's enough. I wanted to be part of your life, not because I need something, but because I see a family worth supporting." Jacob felt a lump in his throat. Her words touched him deeply, and he realized that his walls, the ones he had built after loss and loneliness, were beginning to crumble. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a life where he was not alone, where he and Emma could share their world with someone who genuinely cared for them. As evening settled into night, the three of them sat together on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The Apache woman told stories of constellations and legends from her people, blending wisdom with imagination. Emma listened, captivated, her small hand holding onto the woman's. Jacob watched them, feeling a sense of peace and hope he had not known since before his wife passed. In that quiet moment, the future seemed less uncertain. Life would still bring challenges. There would be hard days, worries, and obstacles, but together they could face them. The connection between Jacob, Emma, and the Apache woman had grown beyond necessity. It was built on shared experience, mutual respect, and the simple, profound joy of being there for each other. And so, life on the ranch continued, but it was no longer lonely. Each day brought new moments of laughter, learning, and discovery. The Apache woman became more than a helper. She became a companion, a teacher, and a friend. Emma had someone to love and trust, and Jacob had someone who reminded him that even in the midst of hardship, life could bring unexpected blessings. Through shared meals, quiet talks under the stars, and the simple rhythm of daily chores, their bond strengthened. It was a connection forged not by grand gestures or dramatic events, but by the honesty, courage, and care that each of them brought into the lives of the others. And as the days passed, Jacob began to understand that family was not just about blood. It was about love, trust, and the willingness to open one's heart, even after years of loss. Life on the ranch continued, but the ease and joy that had begun to bloom were soon tested by challenges. The summer was hotter than usual, and the earth was dry and cracked under the relentless sun. The cattle were restless, the crops struggled to grow, and the wells provided less water than needed. Jacob had always known that farming and ranching were unpredictable, but the pressure now felt heavier. Every day, he worried that he might not be able to provide for Emma in the way she deserved, despite the help of the Apache woman, whose presence had become more comforting than he ever expected. One morning, he rode out to check the fields and noticed that the soil was even drier than the day before. His heart sank. The little garden they had planted with care, the one that had brought them so much hope and pride, was wilting. Leaves curled in the heat, and small fruits shriveled before they had a chance to grow. Jacob felt a pang of helplessness, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel frustrated and defeated. The Apache woman noticed his worry immediately. "The sun is harsh this year," she said softly, shading her eyes as she looked across the land. "But the plants can still grow if we tend them carefully. We can make it through this." Jacob shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if it's enough. Every day feels like a fight just to survive." She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Survival is important," she said, "but hope is just as important. You've done everything you can for your daughter. That matters." Her words brought him some comfort, but the unease lingered. Even with her help, there were moments when the weight of responsibility pressed down too heavily. He worried not only about the crops and cattle, but also about Emma's future. He wanted her to grow up in a home full of love and stability, but some days it felt impossible. Adding to the stress was the skepticism of the townspeople. Not everyone was welcoming of outsiders, and some whispered about the Apache woman's presence, questioning her intentions and her place in Jacob's life. At first, he tried to ignore it, focusing only on what mattered, keeping his family safe and providing for them. But over time, the whispers became harder to dismiss. He could not help but notice the judgmental glances when they went to town, or the quiet comments muttered under someone's breath. One afternoon, as he returned from checking the cattle, he found her sitting by the well, filling a small bucket with water. She looked up and smiled, but there was a faint worry in her eyes. "Jacob," she said, "I've heard what people are saying about me." I know they don't understand why I'm here." He sat beside her, exhausted and conflicted. "I don't care what they think," he said, though even his voice sounded uncertain. "But I can't pretend their words don't sting. I don't want this to become harder for you or for Emma." She shook her head, resolute. "Let them talk. I am here because I want to help, not because I need to prove myself. You and Emma matter more to me than their opinions. I'm willing to face their doubts if it means being part of your lives." Her words reminded him of why he had begun to trust her, why he had allowed himself to let her into their home. There was a courage and honesty in her that made him believe in her, even when the world outside seemed harsh and unwelcoming. Yet, even as they worked together and supported each other, doubts crept into Jacob's mind. The Apache woman had spoken openly about needing a husband, and while he valued her presence, he worried about whether her feelings were genuine. Did she care for him because she truly wanted to, or because she sought stability through marriage? It was a question he could not easily answer, and it caused him to pull back slightly, unsure how to reconcile his feelings with the reality of her words. At the same time, the Apache woman faced her own struggles. She had grown attached to Jacob and Emma, but she also knew that stepping fully into their lives carried risk. Her family and community might not approve, and she feared being judged for forming bonds outside her tribe. But each day, as she watched Emma laugh, as she shared meals with them, and as she worked alongside Jacob, her resolve grew stronger. She had chosen to be there, and she would face whatever challenges came with that choice. One particularly hot afternoon, tension reached a breaking point. Jacob had spent the morning tending to the cattle and was returning home, exhausted. He found the Apache woman in the garden, trying to water the plants despite the heat. She looked up, smiling, but he noticed the beads of sweat on her forehead and the strain in her hands. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," he said, stepping closer. "Let me help." "I can manage," she replied, though there was a note of stubbornness in her voice. "I want to do this. It's part of helping you, part of being here with your family." Jacob felt a surge of frustration, both at the situation and at himself. "I don't need you to work yourself to exhaustion," he said. I want to be sure you're here because you want to be, not because you feel you have to be." Her expression softened and she reached out, touching his arm gently. "Jacob," she said, "I'm here because I care, not because I have to be. You and Emma, you matter to me more than anything else right now. That's the truth." Her honesty eased some of his doubts, but it could not erase all of them. The fear of being hurt, of losing someone he had come to care for deeply, lingered in his mind. And yet, as he watched her tend the garden with careful attention and genuine concern, he realized that trust was something built over time, not demanded all at once. Over the next few weeks, small crises continued to test their bond. A sudden storm swept through the area, damaging part of the roof on Jacob's house. He and the Apache woman worked side by side, patching the damage as rain poured around them. Emma watched from a safe distance, holding a lantern, her small hands trembling with worry. The storm was frightening, but it also brought them together in a way that strengthened their connection. They relied on each other, shared the labor, and comforted each other through the fear. One evening, after the storm had passed, they sat together by the fireplace, drying their clothes and warming themselves. The Apache woman handed Jacob a cup of tea, and for a long moment they simply sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire. "You know," Jacob said quietly, "I used to think I could handle everything on my own, but I realize now I can't. I need help, and I need someone I can trust." She looked at him with understanding, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "You have that now," she said softly. "You have me if you'll let me be here, not just as help but as someone who cares." Jacob felt a swell of emotion he could not fully express. He nodded, feeling the tension and doubt begin to ease. It was not a solution to all their problems, but it was a start, a foundation on which they could build trust, understanding, and eventually love. Emma, sensing the closeness between them, curled up next to the Apache woman, resting her head on her lap. The woman stroked her hair gently, humming a soft tune. Jacob watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and gratitude. The bond between the three of them was growing stronger, rooted in shared effort, care, and the willingness to face challenges together. But life was not without its ongoing tests. The drought continued, forcing them to ration water and make difficult decisions about which crops to save. The cattle became sick, and Jacob spent long nights tending to them, worried about their survival. At the same time, the whispers in town continued, testing the Apache woman's patience and resolve. Yet through it all, they found strength in each other. One day, as they worked together in the garden, Jacob paused and looked at her. "I don't say this often, but thank you," he said. "For staying, for helping, for caring. Even when things get hard, you're here. That means more than I can say." She smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "I chose to be here," she replied simply, "because you and Emma matter. And because I believe that families aren't just about blood, they're about love, trust, and choosing to be there for each other." Jacob felt a warmth spread through him, a reassurance that no matter the trials ahead, they could face them together. The Apache woman had not only brought practical help to their lives but also hope, companionship, and a sense of belonging that he had thought lost forever. And so, the days continued, marked by challenges and small victories. Their bond deepened, strengthened by shared struggles, honest conversations, and the quiet realization that they were no longer alone. Jacob learned to trust again, to open his heart a little at a time, and to accept that family could take many forms. The Apache woman proved that courage, honesty, and care could overcome fear and skepticism, building a connection that was strong enough to weather storms, both literal and metaphorical. Through drought, illness, and social judgment, the three of them grew closer, forming a family built on trust, love, and shared effort. Each challenge they faced became an opportunity to support each other, to understand each other, and to strengthen the bonds that tied them together. And even in the moments of doubt, of fear, and of exhaustion, the quiet joy of being together reminded them that life, though difficult, could also be full of warmth, hope, and connection. The days grew cooler as autumn approached, bringing relief from the long, relentless summer. The sun still shone bright, but the air carried a crispness that hinted at the changing season. Life on the ranch had settled into a new rhythm, one that Jacob, Emma, and the Apache woman had built together. Their routines were no longer just about survival, they were about care, shared effort, and the quiet joy of being together. Even in the midst of ongoing challenges, there was laughter, warmth, and hope in the household that had been missing for so long. Jacob had learned to trust the Apache woman fully. Her presence was no longer a curiosity or a question mark, she was part of the family. He watched as she helped Emma with her lessons, taught her small chores, and encouraged her to explore the land safely. Emma, in turn, adored her. She would run to greet her each morning, hug her tightly, and chat her endlessly about school, the garden, or a new butterfly she had spotted. Watching them together, Jacob felt a sense of peace he had not known since his wife's passing. Yet, despite the calm that had settled over their lives, both Jacob and the Apache woman understood that true commitment required courage. They had shared months of work, stories, and quiet moments, but stepping into a life together meant more than daily routines. It meant facing the future openly, acknowledging fears, and making promises to one another. It was a step neither of them could take lightly. One evening, after a long day of tending to the cattle and repairing fences, Jacob found himself sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon as the sun dipped behind the hills. The Apache woman joined him, carrying a small basket of apples she had picked from the orchard. She sat beside him in comfortable silence, her presence a quiet reassurance. "Jacob," she said softly, "I've been thinking. We've faced a lot together these past months. We've helped each other, laughed, and shared our lives, but we should talk about what comes next." Jacob turned to her, noticing the seriousness in her eyes. He felt a mixture of nervousness and hope. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. I don't want to imagine life without you and Emma, but I also don't want to rush into anything without being sure." She nodded, understanding. "We don't have to rush, but we should be honest with each other. We've grown close and I care for both of you deeply. I want to be part of your family, not just as a friend or helper, but as someone who belongs here." Jacob felt a lump in his throat. Her words were everything he had been hoping to hear, and yet he had spent so long guarding his heart that he almost could not believe it. "I care for you too," he said finally. "And for Emma, you've been like family already. I think I'm ready to take that step with you if you're truly willing to face whatever comes next with us." Her smile was radiant, full of warmth and relief. "I am," she said. "I want to face it all with you both." The weeks that followed were filled with preparations for a small, intimate ceremony. They wanted it to be simple and heartfelt, reflecting the life they had built together rather than the expectations of others. Friends from the town, neighbors who had witnessed their dedication and kindness, were invited. Emma was overjoyed, taking her role very seriously as the little helper, deciding on decorations, and ensuring the small garden was blooming with flowers for the occasion. On the morning of the ceremony, the ranch was filled with a sense of quiet excitement. The Apache woman wore a simple dress, practical yet beautiful, and Jacob donned his best shirt, the one he wore for special occasions. Emma ran around, adjusting flowers and carrying small baskets, her laughter filling the air like music. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. They exchanged promises, not just words of love, but of commitment, care, and respect. They spoke honestly about their intentions, the challenges they had faced, and their hope for the future. There were no grand speeches or extravagant displays, only sincerity and the genuine bond they had nurtured over months of shared life. Jacob's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I promise to care for you, to support you, and to protect this family we've built. I promise to face life's challenges with you, side by side, and to make our home a place of love and laughter for Emma and for us." The Apache woman's eyes glistened with emotion as she replied, "I promise to stand with you, to nurture and support this family, and to bring care, understanding, and honesty into every part of our lives. I will face all the uncertainties of the future with courage, knowing we are together." Emma, unable to contain her excitement, cheered and ran into their arms. Her small voice said, "I love you both, I'm so happy." That moment, filled with joy, laughter, and tears, marked the beginning of a new chapter. It was not the start of a story free from challenges, but the start of a story where challenges would be faced together, with trust, love, and resilience. After the ceremony, life on the ranch returned to its daily rhythm, but now there was a new energy that had not been there before. The garden flourished under their care, and the cattle were healthy and strong. Even small victories, like a sunny day after rain or a good harvest, felt sweeter because they were shared. The Apache woman continued to teach Emma about the land, traditions, and simple skills that would help her grow into a strong, capable young girl. Jacob, too, shared his knowledge, ensuring that Emma learned the values of hard work, kindness, and respect for others. One afternoon, as they all worked together in the orchard, Jacob paused to look around. The Apache woman was helping Emma pick apples, guiding her gently while letting her learn by experience. Emma laughed when a small branch fell, and the woman laughed along with her, careful not to scold but to teach patience and care. Jacob felt a sense of gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. He realized that life had brought them together not by coincidence, but through moments of honesty, courage, and shared struggle. As the sun set, they sat together on the porch, sharing a simple meal. The air was cool and fragrant, filled with the scents of the orchard and the earth. The Apache woman spoke softly about the coming season, the importance of preparation, and the lessons that life could teach through challenges. Jacob listened, feeling the truth in her words, understanding that their journey had made them stronger, wiser, and closer than ever. Emma, curled up between them, looked up with bright eyes. "I'm glad we're together," she said. "I've never been this happy before." Jacob smiled, feeling the warmth of their small family. "Me too," he said. "Me too." As night fell, they watched the stars emerge, scattered across the sky in a pattern that had fascinated humans for generations. The Apache woman told stories of constellations from her people, weaving history, legend, and wisdom into tales that captured both Jacob and Emma. The stories were more than entertainment. They were lessons about courage, hope, and the importance of family. In that quiet, peaceful moment, Jacob realized that life's greatest challenges could be faced with resilience, trust, and love. The trials of the past, the loss, the struggle to provide, the skepticism of others, had shaped them, but they had not broken them. Instead, those trials had strengthened their bond, proving that family was not defined solely by blood, but by commitment, care, and the choice to stand together. The Apache woman looked at him, her expression calm and full of affection. "We've come a long way," she said. "And there's still a long road ahead, but I know we can face it together." Jacob reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "Yes," he agreed, "together." And so life continued on the ranch, not perfect, but rich with love, laughter, and the simple joys of shared existence. Each day brought new challenges, but also new moments of triumph, discovery, and connection. They faced them as a family, knowing that the strength of their bond was greater than any obstacle. The small home that had once been quiet and filled with uncertainty was now vibrant, full of warmth and life. Emma grew up with the love of both her father and the Apache woman, learning not only practical skills but also the deeper lessons of trust, honesty, and the beauty of caring for others. Jacob, once lonely and burdened by responsibility, found happiness in the rhythm of their shared life. The Apache woman, once unsure of her place in the world, discovered belonging, purpose, and love that she had not thought possible. And together, the three of them created a home that was more than a shelter. It was a place of growth, understanding, and enduring connection. Their story, marked by hardship and courage, ended not in grandeur but in the quiet strength of everyday life. They had faced droughts, loss, doubt, and the judgments of others, yet they emerged stronger, closer, and more united than ever. The simple, honest bond that had begun with a single, bold statement, "You need milk for your daughter, and I urgently need a husband," had grown into a true family, built on love, trust, and the shared understanding that life, though difficult, could also be beautiful. And as the stars shone brightly above the ranch, Jacob, the Apache woman, and Emma sat together, hand in hand, hearts full, ready to face whatever the future might bring together as a family.